The nurse they mocked was performing emergency surgery when a wounded captain stumbled through the doors and saluted her. In that moment, everything stopped. Blood on her scrubs, scalpel in her hand, faces frozen in shock. Because 20 seconds ago, she'd been nobody. A girl they interrupted mid-sentence, a name they forgot before rounds ended. Now a room full of soldiers stood at attention, and the doctor who'd called her sweetie that morning couldn't find his voice. Nobody knew who she really was. Nobody knew what she'd walked away from. And in 60 seconds, when the truth finally surfaced, careers would shatter, and everything they believed about the quiet young woman in pale blue scrubs would burn to ash. If you want to see how this unfolds, how justice finds the people who earned it, and how silence becomes the loudest weapon in the room, stay until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Westbridge General's emergency department had the kind of flicker that made everything feel unstable, like the whole place might give out if you leaned too hard against the walls. Arya Moss had learned not to lean. Not physically, not professionally, not in any way that required someone else to hold weight. She was 29 and looked younger. Strawberry blonde hair pulled back tight, pale skin that showed every bruise from bumping gurneys in narrow hallways. Small frame, small voice, the kind of presence that disappeared the second someone louder entered the room, which happened constantly. "Moss, I need a line in Bay 3. That was Dr. Brennan, not even looking at her as he passed. Broad shoulders, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that came from never being questioned. Arya nodded, already moving. "And check the discharge paperwork for the MY in 7. Something's off." She'd already checked it, twice. Found the error, flagged it, left a note. But she didn't say that. She just said, "I'll take another look." Brennan was gone before she finished the sentence. Bay 3 was a 52-year-old man with chest pain, sweating, pale, scared. His wife hovered near the foot of the bed, hands twisted together. "You're going to be fine," Arya said quietly, prepping his arm. Her hands moved fast, alcohol swab, tourniquet, palpate for the vein. Just a little stick. The IV slid in clean, first try. She secured it, flushed the line, hung the saline. "Thank you," the wife whispered. Arya smiled, small, quick. Then she was gone. That's how it went, bay to bay, task to task. Invisible until someone needed something, then invisible again the second it was done. The other nurses noticed. Some of them, anyway. "You don't have to run every time he snaps his fingers," said Michelle, one of the senior RNs, during a rare lull near the med cart. Arya shrugged. "It's fine." "It's not fine. He treats you like an assistant." "I am an assistant." "You're a registered nurse with more certifications than half the residents." Michelle's voice dropped. "I've seen you work, Arya. You're fast. You don't miss things. You don't need to make yourself smaller." Arya looked at her. Didn't say what she was thinking, which was that making yourself smaller was a survival skill, and some people spent years perfecting it. Instead, she said, "I'll keep that in mind." Michelle sighed, but let it go. The ER had a rhythm. Organized chaos held together by people who'd learned to function in noise. Arya had learned it fast when she started here 8 months ago, faster than she should have, maybe. But nobody asked questions when you were useful. Dr. Marcus Calloway was the department head. Silver hair, calm voice, the kind of doctor people trusted on sight. He didn't ignore Arya exactly. He just never looked at her long enough to really see her. Then there was Dr. Lucas Brennan. 36, top of his residency class, fast-tracked into trauma. He had the skills. He also had the ego. He spoke over nurses mid-sentence, made decisions without asking for input, and had a way of making you feel like you were wasting his time even when you were saving it. Arya had worked with worse. She kept her head down, did her job, went home to a studio apartment that still had boxes she hadn't unpacked. She didn't go out, didn't make friends, didn't talk about where she'd been before Westbridge. People assumed she was just young and shy. They were half right. It was a Tuesday when things started to crack. The day shift was thinning out. Arya was restocking a crash cart when she heard Brennan's voice spike across the department. "Who the hell moved my patient?" She looked up. Brennan was standing outside Bay 5, face red, staring at an empty bed. One of the newer nurses, Jordan, looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. Dr. Calloway said to transfer him to ICU. "I didn't clear that." "But the orders..." I don't care what the orders said. That's my patient. You don't move him without checking with me first. Jordan stammered something. Brennan cut him off. Arya set down the supplies and walked over. Her voice was quiet. Dr. Calloway signed off on the transfer 20 minutes ago. Jordan followed protocol. Brennan turned. His eyes were cold. I'm sorry, did I ask you? No, but Jordan did his job correctly. I'll decide what's correct. The patient needed ICU-level monitoring. Waiting would have been a risk. Brennan stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, just enough to make the space feel smaller. You've been here, what, 8 months? You think that makes you qualified to second-guess me? Arya didn't step back, didn't raise her voice. I think it makes me qualified to read transfer orders. For a second, something flickered across Brennan's face. Surprise, maybe, like he'd expected her to fold. Then it hardened. Stay in your lane, Moss. He walked away. Jordan exhaled. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. Later, Michelle found her in the supply room. You're going to make an enemy out of him. I didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. Brennan doesn't forget. Arya shrugged. She'd dealt with worse than Brennan's ego. She'd dealt with people who didn't just ignore you. They erased you, made you disappear in ways that had nothing to do with being quiet. She finished her shift and went home. The next morning, the tension was still there. Brennan didn't speak to her unless he had to, and when he did, his tone was clipped. Professional in the way that made it clear he thought she wasn't worth the extra syllable. Arya didn't push it. She just worked. But she noticed things. The way Brennan hesitated before certain procedures. The way his orders sometimes contradicted themselves. The way he relied on confidence to cover gaps in experience. She didn't say anything. It wasn't her job to fix him. Then the call came in. It was 3:47 p.m. The radio crackled to life, and dispatch's voice cut through the department like a blade. Westbridge General, be advised, multiple incoming trauma, military aircraft incident, estimate 6 to 8 casualties, ETA 12 minutes. The room shifted. Dr. Calloway's voice carried across the department. Clear bays 1 through 6. I want trauma teams staged and ready. Nurses, prep for mass casualty protocol. Move. People moved. Arya's hands were already in motion, grabbing kits, setting up lines, pulling medications. Her brain had clicked into a different gear, the one that didn't hesitate, didn't second guess, didn't waste time on fear. Brennan was barking orders at residents. I want portable X-ray on standby. Get blood products ready. If you don't know what you're doing, stay out of the way. Arya glanced at him. His jaw was tight, hands moving fast but not smooth. There was an edge to it, stress fractures showing. The first ambulance arrived. Doors slammed open. Paramedics wheeling in a stretcher. Young guy, maybe 25, uniform torn, blood soaking through his side. Penetrating trauma to the left flank, the paramedic shouted. BP dropping. We've got 2 large-bore IVs running wide open. Brennan took the case. Arya moved in to assist. Get me an ultrasound, Brennan snapped. I need to see if there's free fluid. Arya already had it. She pressed the probe against the patient's abdomen, angling it to get a clean view. Brennan stared at the screen. His hands hovered over the patient, but he didn't move. Arya's voice was calm. There's fluid in Morrison's pouch. Likely liver lac. I can see that. But he still wasn't moving. The patient's BP dropped again. The monitor started alarming. Arya's pulse didn't spike. She'd heard worse alarms in worse places. He needs surgery, she said quietly. Brennan's eyes snapped to her. I know that. Then we need to move now. For half a second, she saw something flicker in his face. Not anger, something closer to panic. Then he shoved it down and turned to the resident. Prep for OR. Let's go. They moved the patient. The second ambulance rolled in before the first one left. Then the third. Then the fourth. The ER flooded. Patients fourth. The ER flooded. Patients everywhere. Blood, shouting, monitors screaming, controlled chaos tipping toward just chaos. Arya moved through it like water, bay to bay, patient to patient. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't rise. She placed a chest tube in Bay 2. Walked a resident through needle decompression in Bay 4. Caught a medication error before it reached the patient in Bay 6. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, they didn't have time to say anything. Dr. Calloway was managing triage. Brennan was in the OR. The rest of the team was scrambling to keep up. Then the worst case came in. Bay 1. Male, mid-30s, Air Force insignia on his torn uniform. Unconscious. Oxygen saturation plummeting. Airway obstruction, the paramedic said, voice tight. We couldn't intubate in the field. Tried twice. One of the residents moved in, but his hands were shaking. He reached for the laryngoscope, fumbled it, tried again. The oxygen number kept dropping. Arya stepped closer. She could see the problem. Swelling, trauma to the neck. The airway was compromised and closing fast. The resident tried again, failed again. I can't get it. Arya's voice cut through. Calm, clear. Step aside. The resident looked at her, then at the attending physician who'd just walked up, a doctor Arya didn't recognize, older, gray beard, eyes sharp. The attending looked at the monitor, looked at the patient, looked at Arya. You confident? Yes. Do it. Arya moved in. She didn't grab the laryngoscope. She grabbed the surgical airway kit, because intubation wasn't going to work. The window for that had closed 30 seconds ago. Her hands moved on autopilot. Palpate the landmarks. Prep the site. Scalpel in hand. One clean incision. She didn't hesitate. Didn't second guess. Didn't think about the people watching, or the fact that this wasn't technically in her scope, or the 100 ways this could go wrong. She just did it. Vertical incision through the cricothyroid membrane. Insert the tube. Secure it. Ventilate. The oxygen saturation stopped dropping. Then it climbed. The room exhaled. Arya stepped back, pulling off her gloves. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. The attending was staring at her. Where the hell did you learn to do that? She didn't answer, because that's when the boots hit the floor. Heavy, synchronized, the sound of military precision cutting through the chaos. Arya turned. 3 soldiers stood in the doorway, uniforms still dusty from the crash. One of them had a bandage wrapped around his arm, blood seeping through. Another had a gash across his forehead. But they weren't looking at their injuries, they were looking at her. The one in front, captain's insignia on his collar, locked eyes with Arya, and then he saluted. Lieutenant Moss. The ER went silent. Every head turned. The attending's face shifted from confusion to shock. The residents froze. Nurses stopped mid-step. Arya stood there, blood on her scrubs, scalpel still on the tray beside her, and for the first time in 8 months, people actually saw her. Not the quiet girl who restocked supplies. Not the nurse who didn't argue. Not the shadow who disappeared between tasks. They saw exactly who she'd been before she walked into Westbridge General and decided to become invisible. The captain's voice carried across the department. We heard you were here, ma'am. Didn't believe it until now. Another soldier stepped forward. Younger, maybe 22. His voice cracked a little. You saved my brother in Kandahar, 3rd Battalion. He told me if I ever saw you, I should say thank you. Arya's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. She'd spent 8 months making sure nobody asked questions, making sure nobody looked too close, making sure the past stayed buried under schedules and shift work and the kind of quiet that didn't draw attention. And now it was standing in front of her in desert boots and combat uniforms, saluting her in the middle of the ER. Dr. Calloway was the first to find his voice. Lieutenant? Arya didn't look at him. She looked at the captain. You need to get that arm checked. Yes, ma'am. He didn't move. One of the nurses, Michelle, stepped closer. Her voice was barely a whisper. Arya, what the hell? Arya finally turned, looked at the faces staring at her. Shock, confusion, something close to fear in a few of them. She opened her mouth to say something, and that's when Brennan walked back into the ER. He stopped cold, looked at the soldiers, looked at Arya, looked at the attending, who was still standing there like he'd just watched someone pull a grenade pin with their teeth. Brennan's face went from confusion to anger in about half a second. What the hell is going on? Nobody answered. The captain spoke instead. Just paying respects, sir. Brennan's eyes narrowed. Respects to who? The captain's gaze didn't waver. To the officer who kept my unit alive when we had nothing but a med kit and a prayer. Brennan looked at Arya. She looked back. And in that moment, she saw the exact second he understood that everything he thought he knew about her was wrong. His jaw tightened. Everyone get back to work. We still have patients. The soldiers hesitated, then moved toward the open bays. The ER slowly started moving again, But the tension didn't break. It just shifted, coiled tighter. Brennan walked past Arya without looking at her, but she heard him mutter under his breath, "We're going to talk about this." Arya stood there, blood drying on her hands, the weight of 8 months of silence cracking open like a fault line. And she knew, whatever came next, there was no putting this back in the box. The truth was out, and the people who'd spent months talking over her, ignoring her, underestimating her, were about to learn exactly what happens when you don't listen to the person who's been 3 steps ahead the entire time. The ER didn't return to normal. It couldn't. The air had changed, thicker now, charged with questions nobody was asking out loud. Arya moved through the remaining patients like she always did, methodical, precise. But now people watched. The residents who used to brush past her now stepped aside. The nurses who'd barely registered her presence now tracked her movements across the floor. She hated it. The soldiers were being treated in bays 2 and 5, minor injuries mostly. The captain with the bleeding arm needed stitches. The younger one, the kid who'd mentioned his brother, had a concussion they were monitoring. Arya checked on them once. Quick, professional. The captain tried to thank her again. She cut him off. "Save it." He nodded. Understood. She was almost to the nurse's station when Brennan appeared, stepping directly into her path. "My office. Now." It wasn't a request. Arya glanced at the board. 2 patients still needed discharge instructions. 1 needed a prescription refill. "I have... Now, Moss." Michelle was standing close enough to hear. She gave Arya a look that said, "Be careful." Arya followed Brennan down the hall, past the break room, into the small office he shared with 2 other attendings. He shut the door hard enough that the frame rattled. Then he turned on her. "You want to explain what the hell that was?" Arya kept her voice level. "Which part?" "Don't." His finger jabbed toward her. "Don't play games. You performed a surgical airway without authorization. The patient was dying. That's not the point. That's exactly the point." Brennan's jaw clenched. "You're a nurse. You don't make those calls." "Dr. Griffith told me to do it." "Griffith's not your supervising He stopped, took a breath, recalibrated. "That's not even what I'm talking about. Those soldiers. They called you lieutenant." Arya said nothing. "Were you military?" "Yes." "Why the hell didn't you disclose that when you were hired?" "It wasn't relevant." Brennan laughed, sharp, humorless. "You don't think prior military medical experience is relevant to working in an ER? I disclosed my nursing credentials, my certifications, everything required." "You didn't disclose that you were an officer." "I wasn't asked." He stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Anger, yes, but something else too. Something that looked uncomfortably close to insecurity. "How long were you in?" 6 years. "Doing what?" Arya met his gaze, didn't blink. "My job." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." The silence stretched. Brennan's hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to grab something but couldn't figure out what. Finally, he spoke. Quieter now, but no less sharp. "You made me look incompetent out there. I saved a patient. You undermined my authority. Your authority isn't my priority. The patient is." His face flushed red. "You need to remember your place." Arya's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I know exactly where I am, Dr. Brennan. Do you?" The words landed like a slap. For a second, she thought he might actually yell. His chest rose. His mouth opened. Then the door swung open. Dr. Calloway stood there, calm as ever, but his eyes were sharp. "Dr. Brennan?" A word. Brennan's teeth clicked together. He looked at Arya one more time, then brushed past Calloway into the hallway. Calloway didn't follow immediately. He looked at Arya, studying her the way he probably studied X-rays, looking for fractures beneath the surface. "You did good work today," Arya nodded once. "But this isn't over." "I know." He left. Arya stood there in the empty office, adrenaline finally catching up. Her hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed. 6 years of keeping her head down. 6 years of building a wall between who she'd been and who she needed to be. And it had come apart in 60 seconds. She went back to work. The rest of the shift blurred. Patients came and went. Arya did her job, but the stares didn't stop. Whispers followed her from bay to bay. She caught fragments. Heard she was special forces. No way! She's like 5'4". Saw her do a crikey in under 30 seconds. None of it was accurate. All of it was going to spread. By the time her shift ended, the story had already mutated into 3 different versions. By morning, it would be 6. Arya changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, alone. She pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, grabbed her bag, and headed for the exit. The captain was waiting outside. He was in civilian clothes now, jeans, a plain t-shirt, arm freshly bandaged. He straightened when he saw her. "Ma'am?" Arya stopped. "You don't have to do that." "Habit." She almost smiled. Almost. "You should be resting. I wanted to catch you before you left." He hesitated. "I didn't mean to blow up your spot in there." "You didn't." "Felt like I did." Arya adjusted her bag on her shoulder. It was going to come out eventually. "Still, I know what it's like, trying to start over." He paused. "For what it's worth, the guys in my unit, the ones who made it out of Kandahar, they still talk about you. What you did. How you kept us together when everything went to hell." Her throat tightened. She didn't want to remember Kandahar, didn't want to remember the dust and the blood and the sound of mortars hitting too close. Didn't want to remember the faces of the ones who didn't make it. "I was just doing my job," she said quietly. "You did a hell of a lot more than that." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. The captain seemed to understand. He stepped back. "Take care of yourself, Lieutenant." "I'm not a lieutenant anymore." "Yeah, you are." He smiled, small and sad. "You just wear different scrubs now." He walked away. Arya stood there in the parking lot under the orange glow of the streetlights and felt the weight of the past pressing down like a hand on her chest. She got in her car and drove home. The next morning, everything had changed. Arya walked into the ER at 6:55 a.m., 5 minutes before her shift started, and immediately felt the shift in temperature. Conversation stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her to the lockers. Michelle was waiting. "You're trending." Arya blinked. "What?" Michelle held up her phone. On the screen was a grainy video. Someone had filmed the moment the soldiers saluted her. The caption read, "Nurse reveals secret military past after saving crash victim." The view count was climbing. "It's on 3 different platforms," Michelle said. "People are calling you a hero." Arya's stomach dropped. "Take it down." "I didn't post it." "Then who did?" Michelle shrugged. "Someone in the ER. It's already been shared 2,000 times. Arya closed her eyes. Breathed. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid. Attention, questions, people digging into her past, pulling up records, finding things she'd buried for a reason. "There's more," Michelle said, quieter now. "Brennan filed an incident report." Arya looked at her. "He's saying you performed an unauthorized procedure, acted outside your scope. He's recommending a formal review." Of course he was. Arya grabbed her scrubs from the locker and changed without a word. When she walked onto the floor, the whispers started immediately. Dr. Calloway was at the main desk reviewing charts. He glanced up when she approached. "Moss, conference room, 10 minutes. Her pulse didn't spike. She'd been expecting this. 10 minutes later, she was sitting across from Calloway and the hospital's chief nursing officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Voss, who looked like she'd been reviewing legal documents since 4 a.m. Voss spoke first. "I'll be direct. Dr. Brennan has filed a complaint alleging that you performed a surgical cricothyroidotomy without proper authorization. Is that accurate?" Arya kept her hands folded on the table. "Yes." Calloway leaned forward. "Walk us through what happened." She did. Calmly, precisely. The patient's condition, the failed intubation attempts, the decision to proceed with a surgical airway, Dr. Griffith's approval. Voss made notes. "Dr. Griffith confirms your account. However, Dr. Brennan argues that as the attending on duty, he should have been consulted. He was in surgery. That doesn't change the chain of command." Arya's voice didn't waver. "The patient was hypoxic. Waiting another 2 minutes for approval would have resulted in brain damage or death. I made the call." "And you were confident in your ability to perform the procedure?" "Yes." Voss set down her pen. "Your file says you're a registered nurse with emergency and trauma certifications. It doesn't mention military service. Here it was. I served 6 years in the Army, 6-8W combat medic, then officer training. I was deployed twice. Calloway's eyebrows lifted slightly. Why didn't you include that in your application? I wanted a clean start. A clean start from what? Arya didn't answer immediately. She looked at Voss, then at Calloway. Two people who'd worked in hospitals their entire careers, who understood protocol and hierarchy and the way institutions protected themselves. They wouldn't understand what it was like to carry the weight of people who didn't make it home, wouldn't understand the kind of quiet you needed to function when the noise in your head never stopped. So she gave them the version they could process. I didn't want my military background to define how people saw me here. I wanted to be judged on my work. Voss studied her. And how's that going? Arya almost laughed. Almost. Calloway leaned back. Look, Moss, what you did yesterday, it was extraordinary. You saved that man's life. But Brennan's not wrong about protocol. You bypassed him. You made a command decision that wasn't yours to make. With respect, Dr. Calloway, it was exactly mine to make. I was the one standing there. I was the one with the skills. And I was the one who recognized that waiting would kill him. Voss's expression didn't change. That kind of autonomy works in a combat zone. It doesn't work in a hospital. It works when it saves lives. It also opens the hospital to liability. There it was. The real issue. Not whether Arya had made the right call, whether the hospital could defend it if someone sued. Voss closed her folder. We're going to conduct a full review. In the meantime, you're restricted from performing any procedures outside standard nursing protocols without direct physician supervision. Arya nodded. She'd expected worse. One more thing, Voss added. The media is picking up the story. We've already had 2 calls from local news asking about the hero nurse. Do not speak to reporters. Refer all inquiries to our PR department. Understood. They dismissed her. Arya walked back onto the floor and straight into a nightmare. Brennan was waiting near the nurses' station, arms crossed, surrounded by 2 residents who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Moss, he said, loud enough that half the ER heard. You're off trauma cases until further notice. She stopped. Excuse me? You heard me. You're reassigned to low acuity patients, discharge paperwork, wound care, basic vitals. Michelle stepped forward. You can't do that. Brennan's smile was thin. I just did. Arya felt the anger rise, sharp, hot, familiar. The kind of anger that used to get her through 18-hour shifts in a field hospital with no power and no supplies. But she didn't let it show. Fine, she said. Brennan blinked, like he'd expected a fight. Arya walked past him without another word. She spent the rest of the morning doing exactly what he'd assigned. Discharge instructions for a sprained ankle, bandage change for a minor burn, vitals on a patient waiting for a psych consult. It was humiliating, and Brennan made sure everyone knew it. He paraded her reassignment like a trophy, made comments just loud enough for people to hear. Make sure Moss doesn't get overwhelmed with anything too complex. The residents laughed, nervous, uncomfortable, but they laughed. Arya kept working, but the patients noticed. The guy with the sprained ankle, mid-40s, construction worker, frowned when she came in. You're the one from the video, right? Arya's hands didn't stop moving as she wrapped his ankle. I'm your nurse. Nah, I saw it. You saved that pilot. Did the whole emergency surgery thing. He shook his head. And now they got you doing this? She didn't answer. That's messed up, he muttered. It was. By noon, the tension had spread through the entire department. The nurses were whispering. The residents were taking sides. And Brennan was acting like he'd won something. Then the second wave hit. More military personnel started showing up. Not patients, visitors. They came in 1s and 2s asking for Arya by name. Some of them she recognized. Most she didn't. But they all had the same look, the one that said they knew what it cost to do the job and come home. One of them was a woman, late 30s, army jacket over her civilian clothes. She found Arya in the break room. Lieutenant Moss, Arya looked up from her lukewarm coffee. Sergeant Keller, 2nd Deployment, Helmand Province. You patched me up after an IED hit our convoy. Arya's memory flickered. Dust, blood, A woman with shrapnel in her leg screaming, begging Arya not to let her die. I remember, Arya said quietly. Keller's eyes were wet. I just wanted to say thank you. I heard you were here and I had to... Her voice cracked. You told me I was going to make it home, and I did. Arya didn't know what to say. Keller wiped her eyes. Anyway, I won't take up your time. I just needed you to know. She left. Arya sat there, coffee going cold in her hands, and felt something inside her chest crack a little wider. The rest of the day was a blur. More visitors, more whispers, more of Brennan's smug little comments. By the time her shift ended, Arya was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the work. She was halfway to her car when she heard footsteps behind her. Arya, wait! She turned. Dr. Griffith, the attending who'd authorized the surgical airway, was jogging toward her. He was older, probably late 50s, with the kind of calm that came from decades of emergencies. I wanted to talk to you, he said, slightly out of breath. About yesterday. Arya tensed. If this is about the complaint, it's not. He held up a hand. I already gave my statement. You made the right call. I stand by that. She exhaled. Griffith looked at her for a long moment. I also wanted to ask you something, off the record. Okay. Why are you here? She frowned. I work here. No, I mean, he gestured vaguely. You've got skills most of our residents don't have. You've got field experience that would make you invaluable in any trauma center in the country. So why are you working under someone like Brennan, taking orders from people half as competent as you? Arya didn't answer right away. Because the truth was complicated. The truth was that she'd left the military because she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't carry the weight of every soldier she couldn't save. Couldn't function in a system that sent kids into war zones and expected them to come back whole. The truth was that she'd wanted quiet. Wanted normal. Wanted to disappear into a job where life and death didn't hinge on her decisions every single day. But that hadn't worked either. I just wanted to help people, she said finally, without all the noise. Griffith nodded slowly. I get that. But Arya, you can't hide who you are. Not here. Not after yesterday. I'm not hiding. Yes, you are. His voice was gentle. And it's eating you alive. He walked away before she could respond. Arya got in her car and sat there in the dark parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel. Griffith was wrong. She wasn't hiding. She was surviving. There was a difference. The next morning, everything came to a head. Arya walked into the ER and immediately knew something was off. The nurses were clustered near the main desk, voices low. Michelle saw her and waved her over urgently. What's going on? Michelle handed her a tablet. On the screen was an email. Hospital-wide distribution. Subject: Personnel update. Effective immediately, RN Arya Moss is under formal review, pending investigation into unauthorized medical procedures. All staff are reminded to adhere strictly to scope of practice guidelines. Arya's stomach turned to ice. Brennan pushed it through, Michelle said, voice tight with anger. He went over Calloway's head, straight to administration. When? This morning. It hit everyone's inbox 20 minutes ago. Arya scanned the rest of the email. Formal review. Potential suspension. Possible termination depending on findings. Her career distilled into 3 clinical paragraphs. This is bullshit, one of the other nurses muttered. You saved a man's life. Doesn't matter, another one said. Brennan's got the board scared about liability. Arya set down the tablet. Her hands were steady, but her pulse was hammering. She'd survived firefights, survived watching soldiers bleed out in her arms, survived losing people she'd promised to save. But this felt different. This was designed to erase her, to take everything she'd worked for and reduce it to a cautionary tale about nurses who didn't know their place. She looked at Michelle. Where's Brennan? Arya, don't... But she was already walking. She found him in the doctor's lounge, sitting with 2 other attendings, coffee in hand, looking entirely too satisfied with himself. He saw her coming and smiled. Moss, I assume you saw the email. Arya stopped in front of him, didn't sit, didn't soften her stance. You want to destroy my career because I made you look bad. I want to protect this hospital from reckless behavior. I saved a patient. You violated protocol. He stood, setting down his coffee. You seem to think your military background gives you special privileges. It doesn't. Here, you're a nurse. Act like one. The other attendings were watching, waiting. Arya's voice dropped, quiet, cold. You're scared. Brennan's smile faltered. Excuse me? You're scared because you hesitated yesterday. Because when it mattered, you didn't know what to do. And I did. She stepped closer. So now you're trying to bury me before anyone else figures it out. His face went red. You're out of line. No, I'm exactly on the line, and you can't stand it. The lounge went dead silent. Brennan's jaw worked. His hands clenched. Get out. Gladly. She turned and walked out. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage. She made it halfway down the hall before the alarms started blaring. Code blue, main hallway. Code blue. Arya's head snapped up. People were running, voices shouting. She sprinted toward the commotion and froze. Dr. Brennan was on the floor, convulsing. His eyes rolled back, foam at his lips. One of the residents was on his knees beside him, hands hovering uselessly. He collapsed. I don't... The attending from the lounge was barking orders, but his voice was panicked, unsteady. Arya's brain kicked into overdrive. Seizure, respiratory compromise, airway at risk. She shoved through the crowd and dropped to her knees beside Brennan. Roll him on his side. Now! The resident hesitated. Do it! They rolled him. Arya's hands moved fast, checking his airway, his pulse, his pupils. Get me a crash cart and page anesthesia. Someone ran. Brennan's body jerked. His breathing was erratic, shallow. Arya's voice cut through the chaos. He's not getting enough oxygen. I need an airway kit. A nurse appeared with the kit. Arya's hands didn't shake as she prepped. This was the man who'd just tried to end her career, the man who'd humiliated her, undermined her, made her a target. And now his life was in her hands. She didn't hesitate. Arya's fingers found the pulse point on Brennan's neck. Weak, thready. His chest was barely moving. Bag him, she said to the nurse beside her. Now. The nurse grabbed the bag valve mask, positioned it over Brennan's face, and started squeezing. His chest rose slightly. Not enough. Harder. Full compressions on the bag. The seizure had stopped, but Brennan's body was limp, pupils unresponsive. His skin had gone gray. The crash cart arrived. Arya didn't look up. Get me an IV, 2 lines, and I want labs, CBC, metabolic panel, tox screen. A resident moved to start the IV. His hands were shaking so badly he missed the vein twice. Arya's voice stayed level. Switch with me. She handed off airway management to another nurse and took the IV kit. Found the vein in 3 seconds, slid the catheter in clean, secured it, started the line. Second access point, she said, already prepping Brennan's other arm. The attending, Dr. Vasquez, was standing over them, pale. What happened? Seizure. Full tonic-clonic, approximately 90 seconds duration. Did he hit his head? Didn't see impact, but we need to rule out intracranial bleed. Was he on any medications? Nobody knew. Arya's hands kept moving. Second IV in, fluids running. Someone check his locker, his bag, anything. A nurse sprinted off. Brennan's breathing was stabilizing under the mask, but he was still unconscious. Arya checked his pupils again, still sluggish. We need imaging, she said. CT head, and get neurology down here. Vasquez nodded, already pulling out his phone. The ER was packed now, staff crowding the hallway, some trying to help, most just staring. Michelle appeared at Arya's shoulder. What do you need? Space. Get these people back. Michelle started clearing the hallway. Her voice was sharp. Everyone not actively helping. Move. Now. The crowd thinned. Arya rechecked Brennan's vitals. Heart rate climbing. Blood pressure still low but improving. Respiratory effort better with the bag support. She sat back on her heels, hands finally still. The man who'd spent the last 48 hours trying to destroy her was alive because she'd done her job. Dr. Griffith pushed through the crowd, took one look at the scene and immediately dropped beside her. Talk to me. Grand mal seizure, no known history, airway compromise during the event. We've got him bagged and 2 lines running, waiting on CT and neuro. Griffith checked Brennan's pupils himself. Good work. The words barely registered. Arya was watching Brennan's chest rise and fall with each compression of the bag, each breath keeping him alive. "Arya." Griffith's voice was quieter. "You okay?" She looked at him. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." Before she could answer, the nurse came back holding a prescription bottle. "Found this in his locker." Griffith took it, read the label. His face went tight. "Antiarrhythmics. He's got a cardiac history." Arya's stomach dropped. He never disclosed that. Probably didn't want it affecting his career. Griffith looked at Vasquez. "Get cardiology down here, too. If this was arrhythmia-induced syncope, the seizure could have been secondary to hypoxia." They moved Brennan onto a gurney. Arya stood back, letting the doctors take over. Her scrubs were wrinkled, hair falling out of her ponytail, hands marked with tape residue, and Brennan's blood from the IV. She looked down at herself and felt nothing. Michelle touched her arm. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." Arya let herself be led to the break room. Michelle handed her a bottle of water. She drank it without tasting it. "You saved him," Michelle said. Arya didn't respond. "You know that, right? He would have died if you hadn't been there. Someone else would have—" "No." Michelle's voice was firm. Everyone froze. That resident didn't know what to do. Vasquez was panicking. You were the only one who kept your head. Arya set down the water bottle. Her hands were trembling now. Not from adrenaline, from something deeper. "He tried to ruin me," she said quietly. "I know. This morning, that email, he wanted me gone. I know. And I just saved his life." Michelle sat beside her. "Yeah, you did, because that's who you are." Arya closed her eyes. She'd spent 6 years in the military learning to compartmentalize, to separate the person from the mission, to do the job regardless of what you felt. But this wasn't a war zone. This was supposed to be different. She opened her eyes. "I need to get back out there. Take 5 minutes. I'm fine." Arya, but she was already standing. She washed her hands, fixed her hair, straightened her scrubs. Then she walked back onto the floor like nothing had happened. Brennan was being wheeled to CT. Vasquez was coordinating with radiology. The ER was slowly returning to its normal chaos. Arya picked up a chart, started reviewing discharge orders. Dr. Calloway found her 20 minutes later. "Moss, a word." They stepped into an empty exam room. Calloway closed the door. "I just spoke with Dr. Griffith," he said. "He told me what you did." Arya waited. "That's twice in 2 days you've saved a life under extreme pressure. Twice you've performed beyond expectation." "I was just—" "Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't say you were just doing your job. What you did today, most people would have walked away, would have let someone else handle it." "I'm not most people." "No, you're not." Calloway's expression was complicated. "Which is why I need to ask you something. Why didn't you walk away?" The question hung in the air. Arya thought about Brennan's face when he'd filed that complaint, the satisfaction in his voice when he'd reassigned her, the email that had gone out to the entire hospital. "Because it wasn't about him," she said finally. "It was about the patient." Calloway nodded slowly. "That's the right answer." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm recommending the review be dropped." Something in Arya's chest loosened. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The board still has to approve it, and Brennan's complaint is on record. I understand. But after today, after this, it's going to be a lot harder for them to justify punishing you." He left. Arya stood there in the quiet exam room, alone with the sound of her own breathing. She'd won. Not the way she'd wanted. Not through vindication or justice or anyone finally listening. She'd won by doing exactly what they'd tried to punish her for. By being better. The rest of the day was strange. People treated her differently. Not just with respect. With something closer to awe. The nurses kept finding reasons to work near her. The residents asked her opinion on cases. Even the attendings who'd barely acknowledged her existence started nodding when she passed. She hated it. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid. Being visible, being watched, being put on some kind of pedestal she didn't ask for and couldn't live up to. But it was too late now. The video from the day before had gone viral. By end of shift, it had 500,000 views. News outlets were picking it up. Military nurse saves pilot's life, then saves the doctor who tried to fire her. The narrative was writing itself, and Arya couldn't stop it. She was leaving through the staff exit when she nearly collided with someone. Sorry, She looked up. A woman in a crisp business suit stood there, phone in hand, recorder visible. Arya Moss? I'm Jennifer Kane with Channel 7 News. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about... No comment. Arya tried to move past. The reporter stepped with her. Just a few minutes. People want to know your story. The hero nurse who... I'm not a hero. But you saved... I did my job. That's it. Is it true you were dishonorably discharged from the military? Arya stopped cold. The reporter's expression didn't change. Professional, neutral. But her eyes were sharp. Where did you hear that? I have sources. Is it true? No. Then why did you leave? Arya's jaw clenched. This conversation is over. She walked away. Fast. The reporter called after her, but Arya didn't turn around. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking again. Dishonorably discharged. Someone was digging. Someone was spreading lies. And the story was shifting, from hero nurse to something darker. She sat in her car and pulled out her phone. Scrolled through the comments on the viral video. Most were supportive. But scattered between the praise were other things. Why did she really leave the military? Something doesn't add up. My cousin says she got kicked out for insubordination. None of it was true. All of it would stick. Arya tossed her phone onto the passenger seat and drove home. The apartment felt smaller than usual. She dumped her bag by the door, peeled off her scrubs, and stood under the shower until the water ran cold. When she got out, her phone was ringing. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Lieutenant Moss, this is Colonel Raymond Harding. We haven't spoken since your discharge. Arya's heart stopped. Harding had been her commanding officer in Afghanistan, the man who'd signed off on her transfer stateside, the man who'd seen what happened during her last deployment. Sir, she said, voice tight, I didn't expect to hear from you. I saw the news, figured I'd reach out before things get messier. Things are already messy. They're about to get worse. His voice was grave. Someone's leaking information about your service record. Partial information. Twisted. Who? Don't know yet, but it's deliberate. Someone wants to discredit you. Arya sank onto the edge of her bed. Why? You embarrassed people, made them look incompetent. Some folks don't forget that. I just did my job. And that's the problem. Harding paused. Listen, Moss, I know you left the service to get away from all this, but running doesn't make it disappear. At some point, you're going to have to stand and face it. I'm not running. Then what are you doing? She didn't have an answer. Harding sighed. Your record is exemplary. Multiple commendations. Lives saved. If someone's trying to drag your name through the mud, I'll testify to the truth. But you need to be ready for what's coming. What's coming? Questions. Scrutiny. The kind of attention that digs up everything, the good and the bad. You prepared for that? Arya looked at herself in the mirror across the room. Pale. Exhausted. Hair wet and tangled. She barely recognized herself. I don't have a choice, she said. Everyone has a choice, Lieutenant. Not anymore. She ended the call. The next morning, the story had evolved again. Arya walked into the ER and immediately saw the difference. The looks weren't just curious anymore. They were wary. Michelle met her at the locker room door. There's an article. It came out an hour ago. She handed Arya her phone. The headline read, Military Nurses' Troubled Past Raises Questions About Hospital Protocols. Arya's vision tunneled. The article didn't say she'd been dishonorably discharged. Not directly. It just implied. Raised questions. Quoted anonymous sources, saying there were concerns about her conduct during her final deployment. It mentioned the formal review, the complaint Brennan had filed, the unauthorized procedure. It painted a picture of someone reckless, someone who didn't follow rules, someone with something to hide. Arya handed back the phone. Who wrote this? Local investigative journalist, guy named Derek Finch. He's been calling the hospital all morning. Arya felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. Someone wanted her gone, and they were willing to destroy her reputation to do it. Where's Brennan? She asked. Michelle hesitated. ICU, he's stable, but they're keeping him for observation. Arya grabbed her scrubs and changed. Her hands were steady now, focused. What are you going to do? Michelle asked. My job. She walked onto the floor. The whispers started immediately. Arya ignored them. She checked the assignment board. She'd been reassigned again. Low acuity patients. Discharge paperwork. Vitals. Fine. She picked up the first chart and got to work. But an hour later, Dr. Calloway pulled her aside. Moss, we need to talk. His office, door closed. This time, Patricia Voss was there too, along with a man Arya didn't recognize, mid-50s, gray suit, briefcase. This is Andrew Kelso, Voss said, hospital legal counsel. Arya's pulse kicked up. Kelso spoke. His voice was clipped, professional. Miss Moss, I'm sure you've seen the article. I have. The hospital is facing some difficult questions right now. Questions about our vetting process, our protocols, and your role here. I haven't done anything wrong. That may be. But perception matters. And right now, the perception is that we hired someone with a questionable background. My background isn't questionable. And allowed her to perform medical procedures outside her scope of practice. Arya's hands clenched. I saved 2 lives. You also violated hospital policy. Twice. Voss leaned forward. Arya, we want to support you, but we also have to protect the hospital, and right now, you're a liability. The word landed like a punch. Arya looked at Calloway. He wouldn't meet her eyes. What are you saying? She asked. Kelso opened his briefcase, pulled out a document, slid it across the desk. We're offering you a settlement. 2 months severance, a neutral reference. In exchange, you resign quietly and agree not to pursue legal action. Arya stared at the paper. Her career, her reputation, her entire life for the past 8 months, reduced to a severance package and a signature line. And if I don't sign, Kelso's expression didn't change. Then we proceed with the formal review, which, given the current media attention, will likely result in termination, and a very public record of the reasons why. Voss's voice was softer. We're trying to give you a way out, Arya. A clean exit. Arya looked at the document again. At the numbers. At the careful legal language designed to erase her. She thought about Kandahar. About the soldiers she'd saved. About the ones she couldn't. She thought about the captain who'd saluted her. About Sergeant Keller, who'd come to say thank you. She thought about Brennan, unconscious on the hallway floor, and the decision she'd made in that moment to save him, even though he'd tried to destroy her. Then she looked up. No. Kelso blinked. Excuse me? I'm not signing. Voss's face tightened. Arya, think about this. I have, and I'm not walking away. You'll lose everything. Maybe, but I'll lose it fighting. Kelso closed his briefcase. That's your choice, but I should warn you, this will get ugly. It's already ugly. He stood. Voss followed. They left without another word. Calloway stayed. He looked at her for a long moment. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I know. They'll tear you apart. Let them try. He shook his head, somewhere between respect and disbelief. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. He almost smiled. For what it's worth, I hope you win. So do I. She walked out of his office and straight into chaos. The ER was packed. Multiple ambulances arriving simultaneously. Dispatch calling in a mass casualty event. Multi-car pileup on the interstate. All hands on deck. Arya didn't hesitate. She grabbed a trauma gown and gloves and moved to the first open bay. A nurse tried to stop her. Moss, you're not supposed to. There are people dying. You want to argue protocol or you want to save lives? The nurse stepped back. Arya worked, patient after patient, bleeding, broken, scared. She placed lines, managed airways, stabilized fractures, coordinated with residents who were overwhelmed and attendings who were stretched too thin. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for approval. She just did the job. And slowly the other nurses started following her lead, taking direction, moving faster, working like a unit instead of scattered individuals. Dr. Griffith appeared in the middle of it all, assessed the situation, and locked eyes with Arya. You're not supposed to be on trauma cases. Fire me later. Right now I'm busy. He stared at her. Then he nodded. Bay 3 needs a central line. You up for it? Yes. Do it. She did. The shift blurred into controlled chaos. Arya moved through it like she'd been built for it. No hesitation, no fear. Just muscle memory and training and the kind of focus that came from years of working under pressure. By the time the last patient was stabilized, 6 hours had passed. Arya peeled off her gloves and leaned against the wall. Her legs were shaking, her scrubs were covered in blood, and God knew what else. Michelle appeared with a bottle of water. You're insane. Probably. Kelso's going to lose his mind when he finds out you ignored the reassignment. Let him? Michelle laughed, tired, a little wild. You really don't care anymore, do you? Arya thought about it. I care, just not about the things they want me to care about. She drank the water, tossed the bottle, went to check on the patients. That's when she saw him. Brennan. He was standing at the edge of the ER, still in a hospital gown, IV pole beside him, pale, unsteady, but conscious. Their eyes met across the chaos. And for the first time since this entire nightmare started, Arya saw something in his face that wasn't anger or arrogance. It was fear. He walked toward her, slow, each step deliberate. The ER quieted. People stopped, watched. Brennan stopped 2 feet away. You saved my life. Arya didn't respond. His voice cracked. I don't know how to... He stopped, swallowed. Why? The question hung between them. Arya met his eyes. Because that's the job. After everything It doesn't matter. It does. His hands were shaking. I tried to destroy you, and you saved me anyway. Arya was quiet for a moment. Then she said very quietly, maybe next time you'll remember that before you judge someone. Brennan's face crumpled. Not crying. Not quite. But close. I'm sorry, he whispered. It wasn't enough. Sorry didn't erase the complaint, didn't undo the article, didn't fix the damage. But it was something. Arya nodded once. You should get back to ICU. He left. The ER slowly came back to life. Arya turned and found Dr. Griffith watching her. That took guts, he said. It took nothing. Arya, I need to finish my charts. She walked away before he could say anything else. But that night, when she got home, exhausted and hollowed out, she found an email waiting. From Colonel Raymond Harding. Subject, service record. Attached was her full military service record. Every commendation, every deployment, every life saved. The email said, use this however you need. The truth matters. Arya stared at the screen. For 8 months, she'd run from this, buried it, pretended it didn't exist. But maybe Harding was right. Maybe the only way through was to stop hiding. She opened a new email, attached the service record, typed an address she'd been avoiding. To Derek Finch, investigative journalist. Then she wrote, you want the truth about my military service? Here it is. Every word, every mission, every reason I'm qualified to do exactly what I did. Print that. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The next morning, she walked into the ER expecting war. What she found was silence. Every staff member was gathered near the main desk, staring at something. Arya pushed through. On the screen was a new article. Same journalist, different headline. Hero nurse's military record reveals decorated combat. Medic. Hospital's investigation under fire. Someone had leaked her full service record to the press. All of it. The commendations, the lives saved, the 2 silver stars, the recommendation for promotion she'd turned down. Everything. And now everyone knew. Not the twisted version, not the implications and anonymous sources. The truth. Dr. Calloway was reading over someone's shoulder. He looked up when Arya approached. Did you do this? She nodded. Why? Because I'm done running. His expression shifted. Something like pride. Then the doors burst open. 2 people in military dress uniforms walked in. Full regalia, medals gleaming. Behind them, a camera crew. The taller officer, a general based on the stars, walked straight to Arya. Lieutenant Arya Moss. Her spine straightened. Old instincts. Yes, sir. General Marcus Webb, I'm here on behalf of the Department of Defense. He looked around the ER, at the staff, at the cameras. We've been following the news coverage, and frankly, we're appalled at how you've been treated. Arya's heart was pounding. Your service record speaks for itself, Webb continued. 2 combat deployments, 63 soldiers saved under fire, multiple commendations for valor. You are exactly the kind of person we train our medics to become. He turned to face Calloway, and this hospital tried to fire her for doing what she was trained to do, for saving lives. Calloway looked like he'd been slapped. Webb pulled out a folder. We're here to formally recognize Lieutenant Moss's service, and to make it very clear that any attempt to punish her for her actions will be met with, let's call it, federal interest. The cameras were rolling. Arya stood there, caught between her past and her present, and felt the walls she'd built finally collapse. Not in defeat, in something else. Webb turned back to her, extended his hand. Thank you for your service, Lieutenant. Then and now. Arya shook his hand. The ER erupted. Not in whispers this time, in applause. The applause didn't feel real. It echoed off the walls like something happening to someone else, in some other version of this story where things actually worked out. Arya stood there, hand still in General Webb's grip, and felt the weight of every eye in the room. The cameras were still rolling, the staff was still clapping, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that this was the moment she was supposed to feel vindicated. But all she felt was exposed. Webb released her hand. We'll be in touch, Lieutenant. The department wants to discuss potential consulting opportunities, training programs for civilian trauma centers. Arya nodded. Her voice came out steady. Thank you, sir. Webb and his aide left. The cameras followed. The moment they were gone, the questions started. Nurses crowding in. Residents stammering congratulations. People who'd looked right through her 48 hours ago now acting like they'd always seen her. Michelle pushed through the crowd. Okay, everyone back to work. We still have patients. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Dr. Calloway was still standing by the desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Arya walked over. That was quite a show, he said quietly. I didn't ask for it. No, but you got it anyway. He paused. The board's going to want to meet. After that display, they can't exactly proceed with termination. What about the review? I imagine it'll disappear quietly, along with Brennan's complaint. Arya's jaw tightened. Just like that? Just like that. Calloway's voice was dry. Welcome to institutional politics. When the optics shift, so does everything else. That's not justice. No, it's survival. He looked at her. Take the win, Moss. You earned it. He walked away. Arya stood there, feeling the victory turn sour in her mouth. Because Calloway was right. None of this was about what she'd actually done. It was about appearances, about a hospital protecting itself from bad press. The truth hadn't mattered until it became useful. She went back to work. The rest of the shift was surreal. People treated her differently, not just with respect, but with something closer to reverence, like she'd become a symbol instead of a person. A resident asked her to review his chart. Another asked for advice on a procedure. A nurse wanted her opinion on a patient's care plan, all things they should have been doing weeks ago, all things she would have helped with if anyone had bothered to ask. By the time her shift ended, Arya was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the work. She changed in the locker room, alone again. Michelle had gone home an hour earlier. The night shift was filtering in, and Arya could hear them talking in the hallway. Heard she has 2 silver stars, worked on senators, apparently. Brennan must feel like an idiot. Arya grabbed her bag and slipped out the side exit. The parking lot was almost empty. Streetlights casting orange pools across the asphalt. Her car sat in the far corner, right where she'd left it that morning. She was halfway there when she heard footsteps. Arya, wait. She turned. Brennan stood under one of the lights, still in street clothes, no longer wearing the hospital gown. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Arya's hand tightened on her bag strap. You should be resting. I needed to talk to you. We already talked. Not really. He took a step closer, stopped when he saw her tense. I owe you more than an apology. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. His voice cracked. I tried to destroy your career because you made me feel incompetent, because I was jealous, because... He stopped, swallowed. Because I knew you were better than me and I couldn't handle it. Arya said nothing. Brennan's hands were shaking. I filed that complaint knowing it would ruin you. I leaked information to that journalist. I wanted you gone. The admission hung in the air. Arya's pulse was steady, cold. I know. You, what? I figured it out, the timing, the specificity of the article. It wasn't hard. Brennan looked like he might be sick. Then why didn't you? Because it didn't matter. The truth was going to come out either way. But You tried to bury me, and it didn't work. Arya's voice was quiet, level. That's not forgiveness, Dr. Brennan. That's just reality. He flinched. Arya turned to leave. I withdrew the complaint, Brennan said quickly. This morning, before the general arrived, I told the board I made a mistake. She stopped, didn't turn around. I also told them about my cardiac history, how I'd been hiding it, how that's probably why I hesitated during the aircraft casualties. His voice dropped. I'm being placed on medical leave, pending full evaluation. Arya looked back at him. That wasn't necessary. Yes, it was. His eyes were wet. You saved my life, twice, once on that hallway floor, and once by being better than me when it mattered. The least I can do is tell the truth. The truth doesn't fix what you did. I know. He wiped his face. But maybe it's a start. Arya studied him. This man who'd spent weeks making her invisible. Who'd weaponized his authority to crush someone he saw as a threat. He looked broken now. Stripped of the confidence that had carried him through years of medicine. She didn't feel sorry for him, but she didn't feel satisfied either. Good luck with your evaluation, she said finally. Then she got in her car and left. The drive home was quiet. No music, no radio, just the sound of tires on asphalt and her own breathing. When she got to her apartment, there were 3 messages waiting. The first was from Colonel Harding. Saw the news. Well done, Lieutenant. Call me when you're ready. The second was from a number she didn't recognize. A voicemail from a hospital administrator asking her to attend a board meeting tomorrow morning. The third was from Derek Finch, the journalist. Miss Moss, I owe you an apology. I was fed false information and I didn't verify it properly. I'd like to interview you for a follow-up piece. Set the record straight. Please call me. Arya deleted all 3 messages. She showered, made tea she didn't drink, sat on her couch in the dark. The apartment was silent. No neighbors, no traffic. Just her and the weight of everything that had happened. She'd won. So why did it feel like she'd lost something? The next morning, Arya walked into Westbridge General at 6:55 a.m., 5 minutes before her shift started, dressed in clean scrubs, hair pulled back, ready for whatever came next. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. She had 2 hours. She spent the first hour checking on patients from yesterday's mass casualty event. Most were stable. A few had been transferred to other facilities. One, a teenage girl with a fractured pelvis, was still in ICU. Arya stopped by. The girl was awake, groggy from pain meds, her mother asleep in the chair beside the bed. Hey, the girl whispered. Arya stepped closer. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. You did. 3 of them, actually. The girl almost smiled, then winced. Are you the one who saved me? I was part of the team. My mom said you were amazing, that you knew exactly what to do. Arya adjusted the girl's IV. Your mom's biased. She's not wrong, though. The girl's eyes were heavy. Thank you. Get some rest. The girl's eyes closed. Arya stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. This was the part that mattered. Not the cameras, not the recognition, just this. A kid who got to go home because people did their jobs. She left before the mother woke up. The second hour, Arya spent in the staff lounge with coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and a bagel she couldn't finish. Other nurses filtered in and out. Some nodded, some smiled. A few tried to start conversations she didn't want to have. At 8:55 a.m., Arya walked into the administrative wing. The receptionist, a woman who'd never made eye contact with her before, looked up with something approaching warmth. Miss Moss, they're expecting you. Conference room at the end of the hall. Arya nodded and walked. Inside, the hospital's board of directors sat around a long table. 8 people total. Patricia Voss, Andrew Kelso, Dr. Calloway, and 5 others Arya had never met. Suits and ties, folders open, expressions carefully neutral. At the head of the table sat a man in his 60s, silver hair, expensive suit. He stood when Arya entered. "Miss Moss, I'm Harold Winters, board chairman. Please, sit." Arya sat. Winters folded his hands on the table. "I'll get straight to it. The events of the past few days have put this hospital in a difficult position. I'm aware. We've received inquiries from the Department of Defense, the State Medical Board, and no fewer than 6 news outlets, all asking about our employment practices and the decision to place you under review." Arya said nothing. Voss cleared her throat. "The review has been formally closed. Dr. Brennan withdrew his complaint, and the attending physicians who witnessed your actions have all submitted statements supporting your decisions. So I'm cleared." "Yes." "And the settlement offer?" Kelso shifted in his seat. "Off the table. We're prepared to offer you full reinstatement with back pay for any shifts you missed." Arya looked at him. "I didn't miss any shifts." "Right, well, full reinstatement then." Winters leaned forward. "We'd also like to discuss a new role for you, trauma coordinator. You'd be working directly with our emergency physicians to develop protocols, train staff, and improve our critical care response. It comes with a significant salary increase and administrative authority." It was a promotion, a major one. Arya kept her voice even. "Why?" "Because you've demonstrated exceptional skill." "No." "Why now? 2 days ago you wanted me gone. What changed?" The room went quiet. Winter's expression didn't shift. "The situation evolved. The optics evolved. If you prefer to frame it that way." Arya leaned forward. "Let me be clear. You didn't believe in my abilities until a general with cameras showed up. You were willing to destroy my career based on one complaint from a doctor who felt threatened. And now you're offering me a promotion because it makes the hospital look good." Winter's jaw tightened. "Miss Moss, but..." "I'm not finished." Arya's voice stayed level. "I want to see the full investigation file. Every complaint, every statement, every email, everything that was said about me during the review." Voss frowned. "That's internal. I have a right to know what was being used against me. And I have a right to know who initiated the background check that flagged my military service as irregular." The temperature in the room dropped. Kelso cleared his throat. "That was standard protocol." "What? "No, it wasn't. I've talked to 3 other nurses who were hired the same month as me. None of them had their backgrounds audited." Arya's eyes fixed on Voss. "So I'll ask again. Who initiated it?" Voss's face went pale. Winters looked at her. "Patricia?" "It was..." Voss swallowed. "It was a routine compliance check. On just me. You had gaps in your employment history. I disclosed my military service on my application. You chose not to ask for details. We had concerns. You had concerns that I didn't fit your idea of what a nurse should look like." Arya stood. "So you built a case, piece by piece, waiting for me to make a mistake so you could justify getting rid of me." The silence was absolute. Winter's voice was tight. "That's a serious accusation. Then prove me wrong. Give me the file." He looked at Kelso. Kelso looked at Voss. Finally, Winters nodded. "You'll have it by end of day. Then I'll have an answer about your job offer tomorrow." Arya left before they could respond. Her hands didn't start shaking until she was in the hallway. She made it to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, pressed her palms against the cold metal door and breathed. She'd just accused the hospital's chief nursing officer of targeting her, in front of the entire board. There was no walking that back. Either the file would prove her right, or it would prove her paranoid. Either way, things were about to get worse before they got better. Arya splashed cold water on her face and went back to work. The ER was busy. Chest pain in Bay 2, laceration in Bay 5, a kid with a possible concussion in Bay 3. She threw herself into it, let the work drown out everything else. At noon, Michelle found her. "You okay?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." Arya sutured a gash on a construction worker's forearm. Quick, precise. "I just told the board they tried to force me out because they didn't like me." Michelle's eyes went wide. "You what?" They want me to take a promotion, trauma coordinator, more money, more authority. That's amazing. It's damage control. Arya tied off the last stitch, cut the thread. They're scared I'll sue. Will you? Arya stripped off her gloves. I don't know yet. She finished with the construction worker, gave him discharge instructions, and moved to the next patient. At 3 p.m., her phone buzzed. Email notification, the investigation file. Arya stepped into this break room, opened the attachment. Brennan's original complaint was there. Detailed, vicious, accusing her of insubordination, recklessness, and falsifying credentials. There were statements from other staff members. Most were neutral. A few were supportive, but 3 were damning. Anonymous statements claiming Arya was difficult to work with, refused to follow orders, and seemed to have something to hide. The dates were all from her first month at Westbridge, before the aircraft incident, before anyone knew who she was. Arya's hands tightened on her phone. Someone had been gunning for her from the beginning. She scrolled further, found what she was looking for. A memo from Human Resources, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject: background check. Irregularities. Arya Moss. The memo detailed a routine audit that had flagged gaps in her employment history. Questions about her military discharge. Recommendations for further investigation. It was signed by Patricia Voss. But there was more. Another memo. This one older. Dated 2 days after Arya's hire. Subject: new hire concerns. Arya Moss presents as qualified on paper, but her demeanor during orientation raised flags. She seems unwilling to engage with established hierarchy. Recommend close monitoring. Also signed by Voss. Arya stared at the screen. Voss had been watching her from day one, looking for reasons to justify concerns that had nothing to do with Arya's work and everything to do with her not fitting some invisible mold. She forwarded the entire file to her personal email. Then she kept reading. There was a third document, buried deep, an internal email chain between Voss and Brennan. From 2 months ago. Voss. Dr. Brennan, I wanted to follow up on your concerns about Nurse Moss. Have you observed any specific incidents that would warrant documentation? Brennan. Nothing concrete yet, but she has a way of making the other nurses uncomfortable. Too confident for her experience level. Voss. Understood. Please keep me informed. We need to maintain professional standards. Arya's vision went red. They'd been building a case against her for months, waiting, watching, manufacturing a narrative. And Brennan had been part of it from the start. She took screenshots of everything, saved them to 3 different places. Then she walked out of the break room and straight to the administrative wing. Voss's office was on the 2nd floor, door closed. Arya knocked once and walked in without waiting for an answer. Voss looked up, startled. Miss Moss, I'm in a meeting. I read the file. The other person in the office, a man in hospital administration scrubs, glanced between them and stood. I'll come back later. He left. Voss set down her pen. I assume you have questions? I have one. Why? I don't know what you... You targeted me. From the day I was hired. You watched me, built a case, coordinated with Brennan to document anything that could be used against me. Arya stepped closer. Why? Voss's face hardened. You're being paranoid. I have the emails. The color drained from Voss's face. Arya pulled out her phone, showed her the screenshots. You want to call it paranoia? Fine. I'll let a lawyer decide. Voss stood. You need to understand, this hospital has standards, protocols. When someone comes in and acts like those don't apply to them, I never broke protocol. You perform procedures outside your scope. I saved lives. That's the job. That's not how it works here. Then maybe it should. Arya's voice was quiet, cold. You saw a young woman who didn't act the way you thought she should, who didn't defer enough, who didn't apologize for knowing what she was doing, and you couldn't handle it. Voss's hands were shaking. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the board, the metrics, the liability concerns, so you threw me under the bus to protect yourself. I was protecting this hospital. You were protecting your idea of what this hospital should be, and when I didn't fit, you tried to erase me. Silence. Voss sank back into her chair. What do you want? I want you to admit it, officially. On the record. I can't do that. Then I'll take these emails to the state nursing board, to the EEOC, to every news outlet that's been calling. Arya leaned on the desk. Your choice. Voss's eyes were wet. You'll destroy my career. You tried to destroy mine. I made a mistake. No. You made a series of calculated decisions designed to push out someone who made you uncomfortable. That's not a mistake. That's discrimination. Voss covered her face with her hands. Arya straightened. You have until tomorrow morning. Either you submit a formal statement to the board admitting what you did, or I go public with everything. She walked out. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage that had been building for 8 months and finally had somewhere to go. She made it back to the ER, finished her shift on autopilot. At 7 p.m., as she was changing in the locker room, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Miss Moss, this is Detective Sarah Kern with Westbridge PD. Sorry to call, but we need you to come down to the station. Arya's stomach dropped. What's this about? There's been an incident involving Dr. Lucas Brennan. Her heart stopped. He's alive, but he's made some serious allegations. Says someone's been threatening him, trying to force him to keep quiet about the complaint he filed against you. Arya's mind went blank. What? He showed us messages, emails. Someone's been harassing him since he withdrew the complaint, and some of the messages reference your military service. Details that aren't public knowledge. I didn't send anything. We're not saying you did, but we need your statement, and we need to ask you about anyone who might have access to that information. Arya closed her eyes. When do you need me? Tonight, if possible. We're treating this as a credible threat. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up, sat there in the empty locker room trying to process. Someone was threatening Brennan, using information about her past, trying to protect her or frame her. She grabbed her bag and headed for the parking lot. Dr. Griffith was waiting by her car. We need to talk, he said. Arya stopped. Not now. I know about the threats. Brennan told me before he called the police. Her pulse spiked. Did he say who? No. But he's scared, Arya, really scared, and he thinks someone from your old unit is involved. That's impossible. Is it? Griffith's expression was grave. You saved a lot of lives. Some of those people might feel like they owe you, might be willing to do things you wouldn't ask for. Arya's hands clenched. I would never... I know, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. She leaned against her car, exhausted. What did the messages say? Griffith pulled out his phone, showed her a screenshot Brennan had sent him. You tried to destroy her. That was a mistake. Withdraw everything. Stay quiet, or your prescription problem becomes very public. Another message below it. She saved lives while you hid behind protocol. You owe her more than an apology. You owe her silence. Arya's blood ran cold. When did he get these? First one came 2 days ago, right after he withdrew the complaint. Second one this morning. From what number? Burner phone, can't be traced. Arya stared at the messages, the phrasing, the tone, the specific reference to prescriptions, Brennan's cardiac meds that he'd been hiding, someone new, someone close. I need to go, she said. Griffith stepped aside. Arya drove to the police station. Detective Kern was waiting in an interview room. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, coffee-stained notepad. Thanks for coming, Kern said. I know this is awkward. What do you need to know? Kern opened a folder. Dr. Brennan says he's received 4 threatening messages in the last 72 hours, all telling him to stay away from you, to keep quiet about the complaint. Some of them mention details about your deployments, Kandahar specifically. Arya's throat was tight. I didn't send them. We didn't think you did, but we need to know who else might have that information. A lot of people, after the news coverage. What about before that? Arya thought. My commanding officers, soldiers I served with, anyone with clearance to access military records. How many soldiers would that be? Dozens, maybe more, Kern made notes. Any of them have a history of violence, threats, intimidation? No, these are good people. Good people can do bad things when they think they're protecting someone. Arya didn't respond. Kern leaned forward. Miss Moss, I'm going to be direct. Dr. Brennan is terrified. He thinks someone's going to hurt him. And based on these messages, I don't think he's overreacting. What do the messages say exactly? Kern slid several printed emails across the table. Arya read them. The first was the one Griffith had shown her. The second was worse. She's a better person than you'll ever be. She saved your life. Remember that the next time you think about speaking against her. The third made her stomach turn. We know where you live. We know your schedule. Stay quiet. This is your only warning. The fourth was the most recent, sent 3 hours ago. Your cardiac history is interesting. Wonder what the medical board would think about you hiding it. Wonder what else you're hiding. Arya set down the papers. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. Whoever was sending these knew Brennan's secrets, his schedule, his address. This wasn't random. This was targeted, professional. Do you recognize the phrasing? Kern asked. Anything that sounds familiar? Arya studied the messages again. The directness, the precision, the implicit threat without explicit violence. It reminded her of tactical communication, the way soldiers talked when they needed compliance without confrontation. Maybe, she said quietly. Maybe? I need to make a call. To who? Someone who might know who's doing this. Kern studied her. If you're protecting someone, I'm not, but I need to find them before this gets worse. Kern's expression didn't change. You've got 24 hours. After that, we're pulling in federal investigators. And if we find out you knew something and didn't tell us, that's obstruction. Understood. Arya left the station and sat in her car. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, found the number she was looking for. Colonel Harding answered on the second ring. Moss, wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. Sir, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Go ahead. Who did you talk to after the news broke? Who did you tell about what was happening to me? Silence. Sir? I made a few calls, Harding said carefully. Reached out to some people who served with you. Let them know you were being treated unfairly. Who specifically? Captain Reeves, Sergeant Keller, Private First Class Dawson, maybe 2 or 3 others. What did you tell them? That someone at your hospital was trying to destroy your career over a bullshit complaint. That you deserved better. Arya closed her eyes. What did they say? They were angry, wanted to help. Help how? Another pause. I told them to stand down, that you could handle it yourself. Did they listen? Harding didn't answer. Sir, someone's been sending threatening messages to Dr. Brennan, using information about my service, details that weren't public. The police are involved. Harding cursed under his breath. You think it's one of them? I don't know, but I need to find out. Moss, these are good soldiers who think they're protecting me, and they're about to turn this into a federal case. What do you need? Contact information for everyone you talk to. I need to reach them tonight. I'll send it over. And sir, if any of them did this, I'm turning them in. Understood. She hung up. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. A text from Harding with 5 names and numbers. Arya stared at the list. Captain James Reeves, the man who'd saluted her in the ER. Sergeant Emily Keller, the woman who'd thanked her for saving her life. PFC Marcus Dawson, a kid she'd patched up after an IED blast. Staff Sergeant David Torres, one of her medics from second deployment, Corporal Sarah Vega. A sharpshooter who'd taken a bullet meant for Arya in Kandahar. People she'd bled with, fought beside, saved. People who would do anything for her, including things she'd never asked for. Arya called the first number. Captain Reeves answered immediately. Lieutenant Moss, we need to talk, now. About what? About the messages you've been sending Dr. Brennan. Silence. Then quietly. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Captain. The police have the emails. They're tracing them. If you did this, you need to stop before it gets worse. I didn't send anything. Then who did? I don't know. His voice was tight. But if someone's protecting you, can you blame them? After what that bastard tried to do? Yes, I can. Because now I'm a suspect. Now my career is on the line again. And this time, it's because someone who claims to respect me won't let me fight my own battles. Reeves was quiet for a long moment. It's not me, ma'am. I swear. But you know who it is. I have a guess. Tell me. Corporal Vega. She's been vocal about what happened to you. Said someone needed to make Brennan pay. Arya's stomach dropped. Give me her number. Ma'am. Now, Captain. He sent it. Arya hung up and dialed immediately. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered. This is Vega. Corporal, it's Lieutenant Moss. A pause. Ma'am, didn't expect to hear from you. Are you the one sending threats to Dr. Brennan? Silence. Vega, the police are involved. If you don't stop... He deserved it. Her voice was hard, cold. He tried to destroy you. After everything you've done, after you saved his worthless life. That's not your call to make. You took a bullet for me in Kandahar, Lieutenant. You dragged me out of a kill zone while you were bleeding. You think I'm going to sit by and watch some entitled doctor try to end your career? I can handle this myself. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, the system was going to crush you until a general with cameras showed up. You shouldn't have to fight this hard just to do your job. Arya's voice dropped. I know, but sending threats isn't protecting me. It's putting me at risk. The police think I'm involved. If they prove you and I are connected, I lose everything. Vega was quiet. Please, Arya said, stand down. Let me handle this my way. And if they come after you again, then I'll deal with it. But I can't do that if you're making me look guilty. A long silence. Then, understood, ma'am. It's done. Delete everything. Destroy the phone you used and stay away from Brennan. Yes, ma'am. Arya hung up. She sat in her car, hands on the steering wheel, and felt the weight of it all pressing down. She'd stopped the threats, but the damage was already done. Brennan had gone to the police. The investigation was open, and sooner or later they'd connect the dots back to her old unit. Back to her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should know, Voss just submitted her resignation, effective immediately. Arya stared at the message. Voss was gone, the woman who'd spent months building a case against her, who'd coordinated with Brennan, who'd turned one nurse's quiet competence into a threat that needed to be eliminated. Gone. A second text came through. Kelso's recommending the hospital settle with you. Unofficial number is high 6 figures. They want this buried. Arya's hands started shaking. She'd won, completely. Voss was out. Brennan was on medical leave. The hospital was offering her money to make the whole thing disappear. And all it had cost was her anonymity, her peace, her ability to just do the work without being watched. She drove home in silence. When she got to her apartment, there was an envelope taped to her door. No return address, just her name in block letters. She opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. A job offer. From a private trauma center 3 states away. Head of Emergency Medical Services. 6-figure salary. Full authority to build protocols from the ground up. At the bottom, a handwritten note. We need people who know how to lead. Interested? It was signed by General Webb. Arya stood in her doorway, envelope in hand, and felt the walls closing in. Stay at Westbridge, take the promotion, and become the symbol they wanted her to be. Take the settlement, disappear, and let someone else fight the next battle. Or leave. Start over. Build something new somewhere people didn't know her story. She walked inside, set the envelope on the counter, made tea she wouldn't drink, and stared at her phone, waiting for it to ring with the next crisis she'd have to solve. Because that's what her life had become. One crisis after another, each one revealing more than she wanted people to see. Her phone buzzed. Detective Kern, Arya answered. Miss Moss, we traced the burner phone. It was purchased at a store near Fort Bragg. Military connection confirmed. Arya's heart sank. We're bringing in federal investigators, and we need you to come in tomorrow. Formal interview. We need to know everyone you've been in contact with from your old unit. I understand. And Miss Moss, if you're protecting someone, now's the time to come clean. I'm not protecting anyone. Then this should be quick. Kern hung up. Arya set down the phone. She'd stopped Vega. But the investigation was moving forward anyway, and tomorrow she'd have to sit in an interrogation room and explain why one of the soldiers she'd served with decided threatening a doctor was an acceptable way to show loyalty. She'd have to watch as people she'd bled with got dragged into a mess she'd tried to prevent. She'd have to choose between protecting them and protecting herself. Arya walked to her window, looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Vega was deleting messages, destroying evidence, trying to cover tracks that federal investigators would find anyway. Somewhere out there, Brennan was probably sitting in his house, scared, wondering if the threats would start again. Somewhere out there, Voss was packing up her office, career in ruins because she'd made one nurse's life hell, and finally got caught. And here Arya stood, in the center of it all. Not because she'd asked for it, but because she'd refused to stay invisible. Her phone buzzed again. Michelle. Just heard about Voss. Holy shit. You okay? Arya typed back. I don't know yet. She set down the phone and closed her eyes. Tomorrow the federal investigators would come. Tomorrow she'd have to decide how much truth to tell. Tomorrow, everything she'd built in the last 8 months, the quiet, the anonymity, the peace, would finally shatter completely. And somewhere in the wreckage, she'd have to figure out who she was going to be next. Because the nurse who'd walked into Westbridge General 8 months ago, invisible, careful, silent, was gone. And the person standing in her apartment now, with job offers and federal investigations and a reputation she never wanted, had no idea what came after this. Her phone lit up one more time. Another text, another unknown number. She opened it. They're going to keep coming for you. People like Voss, like Brennan, like everyone who's threatened by someone who refuses to shrink. You can't stop them all, but you can decide whether you're going to keep fighting them one at a time or burn the whole system down and build something better. Your choice, Lieutenant. Webb. Arya stared at the message, and somewhere deep in her chest, something that had been dormant for 8 months woke up. Not anger, not fear. Something sharper. Purpose. She picked up her phone and started typing. General Webb. I'm interested, but I need to finish something here first. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came 30 seconds later. Take your time, Lieutenant. We'll be here when you're ready. Arya set down her phone and looked around her apartment. Boxes she'd never unpacked, furniture she'd barely used. A life she'd put on pause 8 months ago, thinking she could hide in the quiet spaces between other people's emergencies. But Webb was right. She couldn't keep fighting this one person at a time. One complaint, one investigation, one narrow-minded administrator who saw competence as a threat. The system was broken, and fixing it meant doing more than just surviving inside it. It meant changing it. She made a list, not on paper, in her head. First, handle the federal investigation without destroying the people who'd tried to protect her. Second, make sure Voss's resignation wasn't just a quiet exit, but a public acknowledgement of what she'd done. Third, force Westbridge General to change its protocols so no one else had to fight this battle alone. Fourth, decide whether she was staying to build something new or leaving to build it somewhere else. Simple. Impossible. Necessary. Arya went to bed with the list running circles in her mind. The next morning, she walked into the federal building downtown at 9 a.m. sharp. Detective Kern was waiting with 2 FBI agents, a woman in her 40s, and a man who looked like he'd been doing this for 20 years. They introduced themselves. Agent Morrison, Agent Kellerman. Miss Moss, thanks for coming in, Morrison said. We know this is uncomfortable. Let's just get through it. They led her to an interview room, recorded statement, standard procedure. Morrison started. We're investigating threats made against Dr. Lucas Brennan. Messages sent from a burner phone purchased near Fort Bragg. We believe the sender has military connections and possibly personal ties to you. Arya kept her hands folded on the table. What do you need to know? We need a list of everyone from your military service who might have known about your situation at Westbridge General. That's dozens of people. Maybe more? Kellerman leaned forward. Narrow it down. Who did you personally tell? No one. No one? I left the military to start over. I didn't keep in touch. Morrison slid a folder across the table. Then how did these people know? Inside were photos, security footage from Westbridge General, Captain Reeves entering the building, Sergeant Keller in the lobby, timestamps from the days after the aircraft incident. They came to see me, Arya said, after the news broke. I didn't ask them to. But they found out what was happening. Yes. And you think one of them decided to take matters into their own hands? Arya met Morrison's eyes. I know one of them did, and I already made sure it stopped. Silence. Kellerman straightened. You confronted them? Yes. When? Last night, after Detective Kern called. And? They agreed to stand down, delete the messages, destroy the phone. Morrison's expression hardened. That's obstruction. That's preventing escalation. You wanted the threats to stop. They stopped. We wanted to arrest the person responsible. Why? So you can drag a decorated combat veteran through the system for trying to protect someone who saved her life? Arya's voice stayed level. Corporal Vega made a mistake. She thought she was helping. She wasn't. I made that clear. It's done. Kellerman pulled out his phone, started typing. Morrison leaned back. You realize we can still pursue charges. You can, but you won't find the evidence. And even if you do, you'll spend months building a case against someone who will have a dozen soldiers testifying to her character. Veterans groups will get involved. Media will make her sympathetic. You'll win the case and lose the narrative. Morrison studied her. You've thought this through. I had to. Why protect her? Because she was wrong to send the threats. But she wasn't wrong to be angry. Arya's hands tightened. Dr. Brennan tried to destroy my career because I made him look bad. He leaked false information to a journalist. He filed complaints he knew were baseless. And the hospital enabled him because I didn't fit their idea of what a nurse should look like. That doesn't justify... I'm not justifying anything. I'm explaining context. Vega saw someone she respected being systematically targeted. She responded the way she was trained to respond, eliminate the threat. It was wrong. I told her that. She stopped. Morrison and Kellerman exchanged glances. Finally, Morrison spoke. We're going to need Corporal Vega's contact information. I'll provide it, but I'm also going to tell her to get a lawyer. That's her right. Arya wrote down Vega's number, slid it across the table. Morrison took it. One more thing. Dr. Brennan claims the messages referenced private medical information. His cardiac history. How would Corporal Vega know about that? Arya had thought about this. Hospital records aren't as secure as people think, and veterans know how to find information when they need to. It wasn't a lie. It also wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. The interview lasted another hour. More questions, more timelines, more attempts to find cracks in her story. Arya didn't give them any. When they finally let her go, Morrison walked her to the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I read your service record. What you did over there, it was extraordinary. I was just doing my job. That's what everyone says doesn't make it less true. Morrison paused. But Miss Moss, be careful. You've made a lot of enemies, and next time, we might not be so understanding. I'll keep that in mind. Arya left the building and called Vega immediately. It's done. They're going to contact you. Get a lawyer. Don't say anything without one present. Yes, ma'am. Vega's voice was tight. I'm sorry for all of this. I know, just don't make it worse. Understood. Arya hung up and drove straight to Westbridge General. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. She had 3 hours. She spent them in the ER, working like nothing had changed. Patients came and went. Chest pain, broken arm, diabetic emergency, routine chaos. But people were watching her differently now. Not with suspicion, with something closer to expectation. Like they were waiting to see what she'd do next. At 1:45 p.m., Arya changed into clean scrubs and walked to the administrative wing. Harold Winters was already in the conference room. So was Andrew Kelso, Dr. Calloway, Dr. Griffith, and 3 board members she recognized from last time. Patricia Voss was conspicuously absent. Winters stood when Arya entered. Miss Moss, please sit. Arya sat. Winters folded his hands. I'll be direct. We've reviewed the investigation file. We've spoken with legal counsel, and we're prepared to make you a formal offer. I'm listening. Trauma coordinator, immediate start. Salary of $130,000 plus benefits. Authority to revise emergency protocols and implement new training programs. It was more than she'd expected. Arya kept her voice neutral. And what about accountability? Winters frowned. I'm not sure I follow. Patricia Voss resigned, but the hospital hasn't acknowledged why. The staff doesn't know she spent months building a case against me. They don't know she coordinated with Dr. Brennan. They think she left for personal reasons. Kelso shifted. Internal personnel matters are confidential. Not when they create a hostile work environment. Not when they set a precedent that competent nurses can be targeted for not fitting a certain profile. Arya leaned forward. You want me to take this position? Fine. But I want a public statement, acknowledging what happened, acknowledging the hospital's failure to protect me, and outlining specific changes to prevent this from happening again. Silence. Winter's jaw tightened. That would open us to liability. You're already exposed. The emails are documented. The investigation file exists. You can issue a statement now, control the narrative, and demonstrate accountability. Or you can stay quiet and wait for the next lawsuit. Calloway spoke up. She's right. We need to get ahead of this. Kelso looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Winter stared at Arya for a long moment. What exactly do you want the statement to say? Arya pulled out her phone. She'd written it last night, read it aloud. Westbridge General acknowledges that errors in judgment led to the inappropriate review of R.N. Arya Moss. We have identified systemic failures in our oversight processes and are implementing immediate reforms, including mandatory bias training for all supervisors, anonymous reporting mechanisms for staff concerns, and third-party audits of personnel decisions. We are committed to ensuring all employees are evaluated solely on their professional performance and qualifications. She looked up. Something like that. The room was silent. Finally, Winters nodded. We can work with that. And one more thing. What? Dr. Brennan. He needs accountability too. Calloway frowned. He's on medical leave? I know, but when he comes back, he doesn't get to pick up where he left off. He filed a false complaint. He leaked information to damage my reputation. There have to be consequences. Winters leaned back. What do you suggest? Formal reprimand on his record, mandatory ethics training, and he doesn't supervise nurses without oversight for at least a year. Kelso made a note. We can recommend that to the medical board. Not recommend, require. Winters exhaled. You drive a hard bargain, Miss Moss. I learned from the best. Arya stood. I'll take the position. On those terms. You have my answer by tomorrow. She left before they could respond. Walking out of that conference room felt different than walking in. Lighter. Like she'd finally stopped carrying weight that was never hers to begin with. She went back to the ER. Finished her shift. At 6 p.m., Michelle found her. So, what happened? They offered me trauma coordinator. Michelle's face lit up. That's amazing. Are you taking it? Depends on whether they agree to my terms. Which are? Arya smiled, small, genuine. Public accountability, real change, and making sure Brennan doesn't get away clean. Michelle laughed. You're incredible, you know that? I'm just tired of fighting the same battles. So what's next? Arya looked around the ER. The organized chaos, the patients who needed help, the staff who were finally starting to see her as something other than a threat or a symbol. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'll figure it out. That night, General Webb called. Lieutenant, I saw the news. Westbridge issued a statement. Arya pulled up her phone. The hospital had posted it an hour ago. Word for word what she'd written, with an addendum about implementing reforms. They moved fast, she said. They had to. You gave them no choice. Webb paused. So, have you made a decision? About your offer? About what you want to do next? Arya looked out her apartment window, the city lights, the hospital in the distance. I think I'm staying, she said slowly. At least for now. There's work to do here, things to fix, and if I leave before that's done, nothing changes. Smart call. Webb's voice was warm. But when you're ready, when you've built what you need to build there, the offer stands. Thank you, sir. One more thing, Moss. Sir? What you did, standing up to that system, forcing accountability, protecting your people while holding the line, that's leadership, real leadership. Don't forget that. Her throat tightened. I won't. She hung up and sat in the quiet of her apartment. For the first time in 8 months, it didn't feel like hiding. It felt like breathing. The next morning, Arya walked into Westbridge General and straight into a different world. The hospital's statement had gone public overnight. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Staff were talking about it in every corner of the building, and people were looking at her differently again. Not with awe, not with suspicion, with respect. Michelle met her at the nurses' station. "Have you seen the board?" "Not yet." "Why?" "They want to talk to you, now." Arya followed her to the conference room. Inside, Winters was waiting with Kelso and the hospital's PR director. "Miss Moss," Winters said, "we've accepted your terms. All of them." Arya blinked. "All of them?" "The statement is live. We've begun implementing the reforms you outlined, and Dr. Brennan has been notified of the conditions for his return." Kelso slid a contract across the table. "Trauma coordinator. Starting immediately. Salary and benefits as discussed." Arya picked up the contract, read through it. Every term she'd demanded was there. She signed. Winters stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the leadership team, Miss Moss." She shook it. The PR director stepped forward. "We're scheduling a press conference for tomorrow. We'd like you to speak about the changes, about your vision for the department." Arya hesitated. "I'm not good with press." "You don't have to be. Just tell the truth." The truth. Arya thought about that, about 8 months of silence, of making herself smaller, of letting other people define who she was. "Okay," she said, "I'll do it." The press conference was held in the hospital's main atrium. Cameras, reporters, staff lining the back wall. Arya stood at the podium, hands steady, and looked out at the crowd. Winters introduced her, talked about her qualifications, her service, her commitment. Then he stepped aside. Arya adjusted the microphone. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you that what happened to me was unique," she started. "Because it's not. All over this country, in hospitals just like this one, competent professionals are being undermined, ignored, and pushed out because they don't fit someone's narrow idea of what they should be." She paused. "Let that sink in. I was lucky. I had skills that couldn't be dismissed. I had people who stood up for me. I had a platform. But most people don't. Most people just disappear, and the system keeps running the same way it always has." The room was silent. Westbridge General made mistakes, they've acknowledged that. But acknowledgement isn't enough. Real change means rebuilding from the ground up. It means creating systems where competence matters more than conformity, where questions are welcomed instead of punished, where the people doing the work have a voice in how it's done. She looked directly at the cameras. "I'm taking this position because I believe that's possible. I'm staying because walking away won't fix anything, but I'm also staying because I refuse to let fear of being seen, fear of standing out, fear of challenging the way things have always been, stop me from doing the work that matters." Her voice grew stronger. "To everyone watching who's ever been told to stay in their lane, to be quiet, to make themselves smaller, don't. The world needs what you have. The patients need it. Your colleagues need it. And you deserve to do your job without having to fight for the right to exist in the space you've earned." She stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause. Real applause. The kind that came from people who'd been waiting for someone to say what they'd been thinking. Arya left the podium and walked through the crowd. People reached out, shook her hand, thanked her. Dr. Griffith was waiting near the exit. "Hell of a speech," he said. "I meant every word." "I know. That's why it worked." He paused. "You're going to change this place, Moss." "I'm going to try." That's all anyone can do. The next few weeks blurred together. Arya threw herself into the new role, revised trauma protocols, implemented training programs, created anonymous reporting systems, held town halls with nursing staff to hear their concerns. Some of the attendings pushed back. Old guard, resistant to change. Arya didn't back down. She documented everything, built coalitions with staff who wanted better, brought data to every meeting, made it impossible to ignore the problems she was trying to fix. Slowly, things started to shift. Residents asked for her input. Nurses reported issues without fear of retaliation. The ER started functioning like a team instead of a hierarchy. It wasn't perfect. Change never was. But it was real. Dr. Brennan returned to work 6 weeks later. Arya saw him in the hallway. He looked thinner, older. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something more fragile. He stopped when he saw her. Moss. Dr. Brennan. Silence. Then, I heard about the changes you're making, the new protocols. They were necessary. I know. He swallowed. I also know I don't deserve to say this, but thank you for saving my life, for not letting Vega destroy me, for giving me a chance to come back. Arya looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't the enemy anymore, just a man who'd made terrible choices and was trying to live with the consequences. Don't thank me, she said quietly. Just be better. He nodded. They passed each other in the hallway. No dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apology, just two people moving forward. 3 months after taking the trauma coordinator position, Arya received a letter. It was from Corporal Sarah Vega. The federal investigation had been quietly dropped. Insufficient evidence, no charges filed. Vega had written to thank her, to apologize again, to tell her she'd started working with a veterans counseling program, helping soldiers transition back to civilian life. I learned something from you, Lieutenant, that protecting someone doesn't mean fighting their battles for them. It means standing beside them while they fight their own. I'm trying to do better. Thank you for showing me how. Arya folded the letter and put it in her desk drawer. Then she went back to work. 6 months in, Westbridge General's trauma outcomes had improved by 18%. Staff retention was up. Patient satisfaction scores were climbing. And the anonymous reporting system had flagged and resolved 12 issues that would have festered under the old structure. The board noticed. Other hospitals noticed. Arya started getting calls, invitations to speak, requests to consult. She took some, declined others. Because the work at Westbridge wasn't finished, and she'd learned something in those 6 months. Change didn't happen because one person was extraordinary. It happened because ordinary people refused to accept that things had to stay broken. One evening, as Arya was leaving the hospital, she found Michelle waiting by her car. Got a minute? Always. Michelle leaned against the car. I've been thinking about what you said at the press conference, about building systems where people have a voice. Yeah, I want to help. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I've seen the same problems over and over, and I'm tired of complaining about them without doing anything. Arya smiled. What did you have in mind? I want to start a committee, staff-led, focused on policy review and recommendations. You'd be the advisor, but the work would come from us, the people actually doing the job. I love that. Yeah? Yeah, let's do it. They shook hands, and Arya realized something. This was what winning looked like. Not glory, not recognition, just the slow, hard work of making things a little bit better. One policy, one conversation, one person at a time. A year after the aircraft incident, Arya stood in the same ER where it had all started. The place looked different now. New equipment, updated protocols, a staff that actually talked to each other instead of operating in silos. But more than that, it felt different, like a place where people could do their jobs without having to fight for the right to be seen. Dr. Calloway found her near the end of her shift. Moss, got a minute? They stepped into his office. I wanted to tell you before it goes public, he said. I'm stepping down as department head, retiring. Arya's eyes widened. When? End of the year. And I've recommended you as my replacement. She sat down. I've only been trauma coordinator for a year. You've accomplished more in that year than most people do in a decade. You've changed the culture here, made it better. And you've earned the respect of everyone in this department, even the people who fought you at first. I don't know if I'm ready. Nobody ever is, Calloway smiled, but you'll figure it out. You always do. Arya left his office in a daze. Department head. A year ago, they'd been trying to fire her. Now they wanted her to lead. She walked through this ER, watching the organized chaos. Nurses working with residents, attendings asking for input instead of barking orders, patients being treated with competence and compassion. This was what she'd fought for, not the title, not the recognition. This. That night, Arya sat in her apartment, the one she'd finally unpacked, finally made into a home, and thought about the past year, the battles, the victories, the moments where she'd almost walked away. She thought about the soldiers she'd served with, the patients she'd saved, the staff she'd trained. She thought about the system she'd challenged, and the changes she'd forced into existence. And she realized something. She'd spent so long trying to be invisible because visibility felt like a target, but invisibility was its own kind of death. Being seen, really seen, meant being vulnerable. It meant people could judge you, criticize you, try to tear you down. But it also meant you could change things. You could make noise in spaces that wanted you quiet. You could demand accountability in systems designed to avoid it. You could refuse to shrink, even when shrinking would be easier. And maybe, just maybe, you could build something better for the people who came after you. Arya picked up her phone and called General Webb. "Lieutenant, been a while." "It has. I wanted to let you know I'm staying at Westbridge. They've offered me department head. Congratulations, you've earned it." "Thank you. But I also wanted to ask if your offer's still open. I'd like to consult. Help you build those training programs, show other hospitals how to do this right." Webb laughed. "I was hoping you'd come around. When can you start?" "I'll make time." "Perfect. We need more leaders like you, Moss. People who aren't afraid to break things that need breaking." They talked for another 20 minutes, made plans, set timelines. When Arya hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not peace. Peace was too quiet. This was purpose. Clear, strong, undeniable. She opened her laptop and started writing. Not a resignation, not an acceptance letter. A proposal. For a national training program. Focused on leadership development for nurses and medics. Built on the principles she'd learned in combat and refined in the ER. Competence over conformity. Questions over obedience. Change over comfort. She worked until 2 a.m., words pouring out faster than she could type. When she finally stopped, she had 15 pages. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The next morning, Arya walked into Westbridge General for the last time as trauma coordinator. By next month, she'd be department head. By next year, she'd be running training programs across the country. But today, she was just a nurse, doing the work, saving lives, making things better. She checked on patients, reviewed charts, taught a resident how to place a central line. At noon, Michelle found her. "You look different today," Arya smiled. "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, maybe. Like you finally figured something out." "Maybe I did." "Want to share?" Arya thought about it. "For a long time, I thought the goal was to do good work and not make waves. To be competent without being visible. Because visibility felt dangerous. And now? Now I think the danger is staying quiet when you have something to say. The danger is making yourself small when the world needs you big." She paused. "I spent years trying to disappear. And all it did was make it easier for people like Voss and Brennan to pretend I didn't exist." Michelle nodded. "So what changed?" "I stopped asking for permission to take up space." They stood there for a moment. Two women who'd fought their own battles in a system designed to wear them down. Then Michelle said, "The committee met last night. We have 17 members now, and we're drafting our first policy recommendation." "What's it about?" "Nurse-led triage protocols, giving us more autonomy in critical situations." Arya grinned. "I love it. Send me the draft." "Will do." Michelle started to walk away, then stopped. "Hey, Arya." "Yeah." "Thanks for showing us we don't have to accept things just because they've always been that way." Arya's throat tightened. "You would have figured that out without me." "Maybe, but it's easier when someone goes first." She left. Arya stood there in the middle of the ER, surrounded by the controlled chaos she'd learned to navigate, and felt something settle in her chest. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something quieter. Belonging. She belonged here. In this mess. In this fight. In this imperfect, frustrating, necessary work. And she wasn't leaving until she'd helped build something worth staying for. 2 years later, Arya stood on a stage at a national emergency medicine conference. The room held 800 people. Nurses. Medics. Physicians. Administrators. She'd been invited to speak about transforming trauma protocols and building cultures of accountability. But she didn't talk about protocols. She talked about a young nurse who'd walked into a hospital wanting to disappear, who'd been ignored, undermined, and nearly destroyed for doing her job too well, who'd fought back, not with anger, but with competence, precision, and the quiet refusal to be erased. The system doesn't change because we ask nicely, she said. It changes because we stop accepting that competence should require permission. It changes because we build alternatives. It changes because we refuse to shrink, even when shrinking would be easier. She looked out at the crowd. You all know this. You've lived it. You've been the person in the room with the right answer who wasn't allowed to speak. You've been dismissed, talked over, made invisible by people who felt threatened by your competence. Heads nodded, recognition spreading through the room like fire. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Stop waiting for someone else to fix it. Stop hoping the next job will be different. Start building the systems you wish existed. Start asking the questions people don't want to hear. Start taking up the space you've earned. She paused. And when they try to make you small again, because they will, remember this. You're not the problem. The system that can't handle your competence is the problem, and you have every right to change it. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Not polite. Not performative. Real. Arya stepped off the stage and walked through the crowd. People stopped her, thanked her, shared their own stories. And she listened. Really listened. Because that's what this was about. Not one person's victory. A movement. Slow. Messy. Necessary. Built by people who refused to accept that things had to stay broken. That night, back in her hotel room, Arya got a text from an unknown number. Lieutenant Moss. This is Captain Reeves. Saw your speech online. Made me think about something you said once. About how the best leaders aren't the ones who give orders. They're the ones who make everyone around them better. You did that for us in Kandahar, and you're still doing it now. Thank you. She smiled and typed back. You're doing it too, Captain. That's how this works. She set down her phone and looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there, another nurse was walking into another hospital, hoping to do good work without making waves. Somewhere, another doctor was filing a complaint against someone who made them feel threatened. Somewhere, another administrator was building a case against an employee who didn't fit their narrow idea of what professionalism looked like. The system was still broken, but it was breaking differently now, because people were fighting back. Not with violence, not with threats, with competence, with documentation, with the slow, hard work of building better systems. One policy at a time, one conversation at a time, one person refusing to stay invisible at a time. Arya Moss had walked into Westbridge General a year ago wanting to disappear. She'd left it as the person who taught an entire department, an entire profession, that competence didn't need permission, that silence wasn't safety, that being seen, being challenged, being tested was better than being ignored, and that the people who tried to make you small were always scared of what you'd do when you finally took up space. She'd learned something else too. Justice didn't always come in the form you expected. Sometimes it was a resignation letter. Sometimes it was a press conference. Sometimes it was just the slow satisfaction of watching a system change because you refused to let it stay the same. And sometimes, most times, it was knowing that the person who came after you wouldn't have to fight quite as hard because you'd already broken down the door. Arya closed her laptop and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, she'd fly back home, back to Westbridge, back to the ER, back to the work. But tonight, she allowed herself this, the quiet knowledge that she'd done exactly what she set out to do. Not survive, not hide, but fight, build, change, and in doing so, become exactly who she'd always been underneath the silence, a leader. Not because someone gave her a title, but because she'd earned it. One patient at a time, one battle at a time, one refusal to stay quiet at a time. And that, more than any promotion, any recognition, any applause, was what winning looked like. Not a moment, a life, built on the simple, radical idea that competence deserves space, that silence was a choice, not a requirement, and that the people who spent their lives making others small would never, ever win. As long as there were people willing to stand up and take up space, people like Arya, people like the nurses she'd trained, people like the soldiers she'd served with, people who understood that the world didn't change because someone asked nicely. It changed because someone refused to stay invisible. And once you stopped hiding, really stopped, there was no going back. Only forward, into the noise, into the fight, into the space you'd earned. And that space, it was yours, forever.